How much do you know about video games? Well, before we answer that question, we have to answer a different question, which is, what are we even talking about? Knowing a lot about video games could mean all sorts of different things. It could mean you can name the exact date that every single console was released. It could mean that you have the entire map in Super Metroid memorized. It could mean you know exactly what color shirt Shigeru Miyamoto was wearing at the press conference when Pikmin was announced. Thing is, when it comes to older video games, there's a lot to know and a lot to not know. But typically what I think of when I think of somebody who knows a lot about video games is somebody who I could have a conversation about video games with, and they'd be able to carry that conversation. For example, if I was talking to somebody and I brought up Contra and they're like, what is Contra? Then yeah, I think it would be pretty safe to assume they don't know a lot about retro video games. Perhaps one of the most common ways that somebody will say someone else doesn't know a lot about video games is simply for a difference of opinion. Say somebody says, yeah, I think PlayStation 2 is the greatest console ever made, and you think, this person doesn't know crap about video games. And that's just not really what I'm talking about. People are always going to have different opinions. That's more of just a way to try to put somebody down. Like, yeah, you don't know video games the way I do because otherwise you would have the same opinions that I do. That's not what I'm talking about here. The thing is, because video games are an optional thing that we do, you're just going to naturally be motivated to learn about things just from your passion because you want to know these things so that you can have them or know which games to get, or the backstory's interesting because you're really into the game, all that kind of stuff. You're not just gonna learn things that you don't care about. That's for stuff like school. Nobody's gonna test you on any of this stuff, and there's no other sort of negative consequences you're gonna have to deal with. So if you don't know and you really don't care, nothing is really gonna motivate you to try to figure some of this stuff out. However, I will say that there are some things you learn video game related where you're like, hey, I didn't think I would care about that, but now that I know it, I do care. I would hope personally, just from my channel, you've had moments like that. Now, maybe not, you only ever pay attention to the stuff you know you're going to care about, but I would hope that there's certain things I can talk about it in a certain way or present it in a certain way or give some sort of unique perspective on it where I can maybe have you care about something that you wouldn't have cared about otherwise. But besides how much you know about video games, the more important question I'd say is how much does it even really matter? Something I go on and on about on this channel is just how your personal enjoyment is what matters the most. And the thing is, how much you know about video games doesn't necessarily affect how much you can enjoy them. For example, I can play Super Metroid and have an absolute blast. The fact that I don't know what type of glue is used to fix the label onto the cartridge isn't really going to prevent me from having a lot of fun playing the game. Also, just as kind of a quick little side note, I find it interesting that the individual human beings who have worked on a lot of these games often don't really get the kind of publicity and attention that perhaps they deserve. Usually when we think of the games that we love, we think of the companies that made them more so than the actual individual people. One of the signs of somebody really knowing a lot that I notice is when people can name some of the individual human beings that have worked on a game. But anyways, as far as how much you know about games contributing to how much you can enjoy them, I almost think in a weird way knowing less can be beneficial in certain ways. For example, the first time you dive into a system's library and say it's a system where you don't really know what any of the games are, that can be like a kid in a candy store, that experience. One of my all-time favorite video game experiences was back in 2011. I had just graduated from college, and so naturally the next step to take was to get into retro video games. I had not played any of these games since back when they had been the current consoles, and it seemed really cool. But I was pretty unfamiliar with a lot of this stuff, and so I remember getting into the Sega Genesis library. I didn't know about hardly any of the good games when I was a kid, so getting to discover those games as an adult and play some of them, oh, that was amazing. Another little story I got for you, kind of related to that, has to do with Mega Man. Now, when I was a kid, my first experience with Mega Man was actually with a game called Mega Man Power Battle, which was a lesser-known one-on-one fighting game. Certainly not like the main series of games at all. And in fact, that was the only Mega Man game that I ever knew of until I was much, much older. How I missed it when I was younger, I have no idea. I guess I just didn't know anybody else who had it somehow. So anyways, when I was older and I figured out that Mega Man was this series of awesome games that had fully designed stages you could work your way through, yeah, that was pretty incredible to learn that. But that does it for my thoughts. I'd love to hear from all of you. Specifically, how much do you feel you know about video games? And how much does that matter to you? How much do you feel it impacts your ability to enjoy your games? So leave those comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games.